Okay, hi everyone. I think the door is closed, so it's my signal to get started. So I'm Natalie Barra. I have the pleasure of moderating the session today. I am a regional marketing manager for North America at Elsevier. Prior to that, for many years, I was a neuroscience books editor, and I'm a PhD trained neuroscientist. It is my true pleasure to introduce you all to our speakers today. So our first speaker will be Shirley Decker-Lucky. She is the content director for SSRN, the Global Online Preprint Repository, which is part of Elsevier's Research Products Group. For many years before that, she was publishing director for Elsevier's Life Sciences book portfolio and has over 20 years in the publishing space, so she's a great person to have here today. Our second speaker is Jay Bott. Jay is an engineering librarian in the Division of Scholarly Communications at Drexel University Libraries. He is extremely passionate about open science and open educational resources for the engineering faculty and students there. And he will be speaking about the user perspective when it comes to preprints, as well as advanced tools on how to find them, how researchers are using preprints themselves, but also publishing in preprints. I forgot to mention that Shirley will be giving us a great introduction to preprints to start off, talking about the different preprint servers, uptake in different disciplines as well. And last but certainly not least, we have Emily Hard, who is a science librarian and research impact lead at Syracuse University Libraries. She leads a team there and focused on improving research reputation, as well as being the point person for many of the science faculties in the College of Arts and Sciences. She's going to be talking about the impact of preprints in scholarship and research, as well as the metrics, some of the exciting initiatives that are happening in preprints as well. So without further ado, I will actually start with a quick poll, because I'm just curious here, how many of you are being asked about preprints from your constituents, or how to find them, or anything along in that space? Okay, wonderful. Well, hopefully we can answer some of those questions, and for those who haven't been asked yet, with some of the changes that are going on with federal agencies and so on, I think that's going to be a question that is coming, and hopefully this will shed some light for all of you. So I will pass that off to Shirley to get started.
Great. Well, hi everybody, welcome. Congratulations for making it till 4 o'clock. Relatively awake and lively. If I see anybody drooping, I may jump up just to make sure everybody's feeling energetic. Yeah, when I came over from books to preprints about 5 years ago, one of the things that really interested me was the way that preprints is this special space that's very much adjacent to and overlapping with the other scholarly outputs like books and journals. But it's also got its own set of kind of different rules that allow it to be a place for us to really engage with how do we understand our user needs and how do we meet them, and how do we maybe do that in a creative way that we aren't doing with some of the other things that we've been doing up till now. So preprints, most simply, are research output that has not yet gone through a formal peer review, journal moderated process. It can be used to include just narrowly anything that is on its way to be a published article, but it's also more commonly used even broader to include things like conference proceedings, posters, white papers, and that sort of thing. Why do authors like preprints? Well, when we survey authors, the first and second top reason is because it helps researchers share their research early and share it widely. Top huge answers, 50+% of people say this is why they use preprints. There's other benefits too. It can help them demonstrate productivity. Some funders are looking to see if you've got a preprint as an output of your research. You can establish priority because you get a DOI, and that way it shows when you posted publicly your content. You can get feedback from other researchers, whether it's online conversations facilitated by a preprint server or offline in emails, and allows people to showcase their research. So preprints can be cited and are cited, and that's a way of raising visibility. It can also be a place to share research output that doesn't find a home in a journal article. Negative research, confirming results. we have some evidence that tells us that when papers are posted as preprints, that when they become published articles, they are cited more. So in here, the blue indicates articles that are in the same journal, but they appear as a preprint first, and their citations are higher. So it's an interesting thing when you think about the benefit to the author of doing a preprint. Well, why do readers like preprints? This is surveys that we've done. They basically just like them because it helps them get their hands on the interesting research that they want to read quickly and for free. When we look at both readers and authors as researchers, and we ask them, what kinds of content types do you use and for what sort of use cases? This was a study that was done in 2016, still kind of interesting. We did it at Elsevier. The orange line, the yellow line on the outside, shows that for the major use cases, consistently, the published version of record article is preferred by people for things like background reading or citing an article. The red line inside is the preprint one. And I think one of the interesting things is to note that for the reviewing of the article, actually 26% of the people thought a preprint was still a useful resource. And so especially if you're in a situation where papers, you have a hard time accessing papers, or you're in a different use case, you see that people are interested in preprints. I mentioned this was published in 2016. I don't have a newer version of this, but I would pay good money, I would bet good money that now that red circle is bigger. People are just getting more comfortable with preprints in more use cases. There are concerns and limitations to preprints, definitely. The biggest one is that they are not peer reviewed. We don't have an outside resources. We've had a lot of conversations about the pros and cons of our current peer review process, but nonetheless, peer review does help us have some kind of quality sense of a paper, and that doesn't happen with preprints. Authors do sometimes have fear of getting scooped. There are some journals that don't accept submissions that have already appeared as preprints. Some people just aren't familiar with preprints. It can be more work if you have to submit to a preprint server and a journal, like who wants to bother with that? Never mind, okay. And in the cases where feedback is public, there could be some concerns about having negative public feedback. Nonetheless, preprints are continuing to grow globally. We can see that the total volume of papers posted as preprints has grown dramatically. And if you look at the dotted line, the percentage of papers that are posted as preprints compared to the published articles is going, so that in 2020, 6%, all of that output, 6% of it was preprints. So it's increasingly interesting to a number of people. Additionally, the number of preprint servers have been growing. There's something like 65 right now. And while recently we've seen a lot of new people entering into the preprint space, whether it's publishers like Elsevier acquiring SSRN, Wiley, Springer Nature, also funders getting into funding the nonprofit preprint servers. So there's a lot more people getting involved and interested. It's interesting to see, this is just a look at the top preprint servers by volume. Archive's been around the longest, 2 million papers. SSRN, second largest, been around for a while, but all of the other ones after that, these are coming up in 2016, 2012. It's a really recent explosion in preprint servers. The disciplines are also expanding significantly. Preprints first picked up a lot of traction in physics, and then in economics and some of the social sciences. But now pretty much every discipline, every area of study has active preprint engagement in the community. There is still quite a bit of difference among the different disciplines. So if you look at, for instance, the percentage of papers that are, I said that other number of 6% of all of the papers coming out, how many were preprints. You can see in the places where we've traditionally had a lot of preprint engagement, those numbers are still much higher, but you can also see life sciences has grown a lot in its engagement with preprints and a lot of the other disciplines as well. Another way that I look to think about the engagement with the different disciplines is, to what extent do journals in different disciplines have policies about preprints? So in this way, if you look at the step mark, the things to the left of that stair thing show disciplines in which journals either have policies that are explicitly we will accept preprints, or they have, yes, we'll accept preprints, but it has to be, this kind of qualification. The ones to the left show ones where journals have either explicit policies, no, we do not want preprints, and those are those green boxes. Or the orange indicates we just don't have a policy at all. So what this tells me is that we've got different ways where the communities are comfortable supporting and interacting with preprints, and you can see life sciences, earth sciences, hugely accepting, and then all the way down to humanities, which for understandable reasons we could talk about maybe after the session, is less engaged, less supportive, or comfortable with publishing content that has been pre-printed, or they just don't have policies, they're not sure what to do with them. So at SSRN, like I said, we've been around since the 90s. We do now host on our site preprints on every discipline that there could be. And we host preprints, but also this other kind of broad definition of preprints, white papers and so forth. And that's just a little bit about preprints and what SSRN does. And now Jay's going to talk a little bit more about the librarians perspective.
Thank you so much, Shalini, for a wonderful introduction and great insights. And I'm going to start with my perspective as a librarian and what librarians are. And in my opinion, we are the most dynamic people in the world, Central University. We want to make sure that our students learn. We reach out to them, connect with them, interact with them, and whenever something new happens, we are the first one to let them in. And preprints phenomenon is something that really captured my attention, especially during the COVID days. And I used to get calls and emails from our faculty members almost very late in the night, and looking for articles they were about COVID-related stuff. They were trying to design masks or whatever. And that gave me some interest in exploring this beyond. Can engineering be a part of preprints? And if you look at recent data, there are so many engineering preprint servers have also come up. So we are dynamic, visionary, entrepreneurial, and we want quick sharing of information. So a little bit about myself. I love to teach. I love to connect with my students, information literacy, researching, and one of the most things I like is about mentoring our students, our graduate students, our undergraduate students. And we host open houses, and in a very informal way, we try to educate. And I thought that this is a great way for me to at least make our students aware of existence of preprints. And we have so many international students who come in the PhD programs, graduate students, even advanced undergraduate students who want to learn how to write. And one of the things we envisioned was, how about if educate our graduate students to think about writing for preprints. Of course, they need to talk with their advisors, and they'll get so much feedback and exposure in the process. And I believe that the best learning occurs when it involves mutual sharing of ideas, knowledge, and experience. So interaction, engaging with faculty, engaging with students, all of that is so important. And Natalia already mentioned allow open access, open data, and all of that stuff. So first thing is the critical importance of developing awareness among students, even faculty members, that preprints exist, and you can take definitely a big advantage of it in terms of early career researchers and so on. So definitely there are some implications for researchers and graduate students. And as Shirley mentioned, there are advantages and disadvantages. So definitely they need to become about the limitations of preprints. And one of the bigger challenges is the peer review things. But I will also address somewhere later that even in the articles that are already published, there are some issues and there have been retractions, and that number is also going up if you look at the data. The biggest advantage of the preprints is that it opens up a great dialogue among scholars. So you have graduate students sharing their information with other graduate students. They can invite other students from different universities, other faculty members, colleagues, and it can really have a very open interactive dialogue in terms of improving their content. So what is the library's role, right? So what are we here for? And I'm connecting it with workshops, teaching information skills workshop, connecting with Office of Research and educate them about, see if any way we can do some kind of presentations for students and so on. So we already started doing that, and a couple of years ago I came across a preprint which was actually a fake preprint that somebody tried to post, and we captured it. How we captured it? The professor, the researcher who published that preprint claimed himself as if from Stanford, but he already had left Stanford in 2016, and this came out in 2020-21. And the topic was that they were trying to prove that masks are bad for people. Just imagine the impact on the health, and on we are recommending people to wear masks, and here is a paper that came out that against using mask. Immediately that paper, there were complaints, a lot of evaluation happened, and that article was removed, or at least there are some notes about analysis. Then I realized that this is a great way to educate our students about research integrity. If we teach them ethics right now, when they are students, they will probably do a very good paper publication later on. It's a quick way they can publish their papers with the quality papers with ethics in mind, integrity in mind, right? We envisioned, and actually I got this idea about Preprint Club from this website that is underneath ASAP Bio. Also has that website, which is the Accelerating Science and Publication in Biology. It's one of the greatest, you might want to look it up, the number of great resources there. And like Journal Club, this will be a preprint club where there's a number of students can get together from interdisciplinary perspective, they question each other, opportunities to try out methods and ideas. And of course we want to encourage our undergraduate students. We have also undergraduate students working in research labs who are advanced undergrads. So great way to sort of connect with them. One of the big questions that we want to explore is preprints are still not that accepted by many researchers and faculty members. So a graduate student might think about writing for preprint, but his advisor, her advisor thinks that it's a waste of time, you don't want to do that. So how can that dialogue happen? What should we do? Right? How should that student encourage conversation? He may be an advanced graduate PhD student who wants to also work as a postdoctoral research at some other universities. So he maybe want to create a CV. So that CV can include the preprint, right? And many agencies, many NSF and NIH, they also accept preprint now in the citations. So it's very important that students have an opportunity to showcase their own talents, increase their visibility, network, and so on. So these are some steps that I have highlighted, what students can do. Increase the dialogue, encourage their faculty members to learn about preprints, and so on. So the whole paper is cited below that you might want to have a look at it. There's an excellent paper, a guide to preprint for early career researchers, and very recently it just came out in July 2022. So still encourage you to look at it. And the next I want to touch base on how to find preprints. And of course, as much as I love my library databases, there is a place for Google. There's no doubt about it. And that's where I go to advanced Google search. And suppose climate change is a big area all over places. I use climate change and sustainability example. I want to see if there are any preprints available. And if you scroll down further, in advanced Google, there is a place where you can limit your search by site or domain. So while Shelly was showing the list of repositories, one of them she included was Preprints repository. So if I want to know how many articles on sustainability are there in Preprints, I can just simply search preprints.org as a site or domain, and then my search topic, and you will see that all these articles are coming out of that preprint server. So you can actually see here preprints.org and how climate change, law and energy reforms in Mexico, and there are so many other articles that showed up. So you can actually look at a different preprint server and how those preprint servers have represented those papers. And same way, there's so many engineering preprint servers are also being developed recently. And of course, Elsevier is the publisher of Engineering Village, and one of the way they have started indexing preprints. And interestingly, in 2021, we had a session on preprints with Julia right here was moderating that session. And at that time, someone suggested that maybe Engineering Village should start indexing preprints. And that is a comment actually posted while we were referring to those comments, and that was also pointed out, right? So, and then a lot of discussion happened, and now Engineering Village now indexes preprints. And you can see here, when you do a search, I'm using the climate change example, and you will see here preprint. There are close to 600 articles, and when you further scroll down, you can just simply click on find it. These are all preprints, and these were, when I created a slide, they were considered as new at that time. So number of preprints are going up. Many publishers, many databases have started indexing them, including Google Scholar, and Engineering Village, and of course Scopus. Scopus is not indexing it like you cannot find in the search phase, but if you look at the author profile for researchers, you will see that, for example, I'm looking at the author profile for this particular researcher in Scopus, and under this you will see preprints that this person has this many number of preprints. So thank you so much, and I'm now inviting Emily to continue further here. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about preprints in the context of my role as a librarian. And to tell you a little bit about my role, I wear many hats, as we all do. But I'm a science librarian, but I'm also a research impact lead. So the way I deal with preprints isn't necessarily just from a disciplinary perspective, because myself and my team work across the university with disciplines like we have visual and performing arts and humanities and social sciences. And so having a conversation about preprints is very different when I'm talking to physicists versus someone in performing arts, for example. So anyway, but it really is at the forefront of some of the conversations we're having. So anyway, I want to also say that I'm not an expert in preprints, but I think I've actually really enjoyed doing this presentation and have learned a lot, so I'm hoping to infuse some of that into the presentation today and share that with you. So there are some really interesting things happening in the preprint sphere, and I think that I don't know that anyone could be an expert in preprints right now because it's changing so quickly. Okay, so some of the ways that I deal with preprints are to help contextualize what preprints are. So, whether it's in an author who's trying to publish, especially someone in, for example, again, the humanities where it's not normal in their discipline to do preprints, or to even have a publication that may be indexed in a large database or have a DOI. So this is foreign. So, providing context, but also, where it falls in terms of how do I use this in my research, for example. Preprint discovery is interesting because there are so many preprint servers out there. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And author best practices, I mentioned that a little bit. I'm going to get into metrics because I do work with metrics a lot in my role as research impact. And then I also feel that I'm an advocate for improved infrastructure for preprints. I am on a couple advisory boards with different vendors, and as well as looking at things like internally to look at our own systems and how we're dealing with things like preprints and POIs. So because of the hat that I wear, I think it's important that we're also advocating for good infrastructure and good practices around preprints. Okay. So I mentioned this a little bit, but so providing context. So I'm having, again, conversations across the university with researchers and scholars, students. Some of the best conversations I have with grad students, which is similar to Jay, but they haven't necessarily entered into the publishing realm yet, but they know what their advisors are telling them. They may have it, someone may, for example, a physicist, it's just disciplinary practice to do it, but why? Why are they doing it? So providing some of that context for them. Again, situating preprints in the publishing landscape. Again, it's really, when someone's not familiar with it, again, trying to situate where preprints happen. Like Shirley had that great image at the beginning of the presentation where it showed where preprints exist. There are a lot of disciplinary preprint trends. I read some great stuff happening like in the bioarchive and med archive kind of areas, but it's still, again, like I said, largely unknown or not practiced in areas like humanities yet. And then providing context about things like indexing, and this could happen in multiple spheres. So it could be talking with an author who is trying to publish, and again, this is a conversation I have a lot with faculty, again, in humanities and social sciences. So if you want to get your stuff out there and you want to publish for impact, I may be having this conversation when they're going out for tenure and promotion, for example. If you're not publishing open access or having preprints or have a DOI and people can't find your stuff, then it's really hard to track those citations and to look at the attention that your publications are getting. So anyway, and then there are lots of misunderstandings about preprints and definitely room for growth and things like how we're treating peer review for preprints and things like submission guidelines to preprint servers, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so I think this is a really interesting sphere or interesting aspect of preprint discovery, or is preprint discovery right now, because everyone's doing it different, right? There's no standard for which databases are starting to index preprints, and they're all doing it in different ways. So I'm going to start by saying there's one, the ASAP Bio. Again, Jay mentioned it, but I highly recommend that you go to their site. They have an advisory group. They have created a directory of discipline-specific discipline-specific preprint repositories. And one of the things I really appreciate about their directory is that they're doing things like they have a column for submission guidelines. So how are people, what are the requirements to submit to this repository? Who's the publisher or organization behind this repository? What are their archiving practices? So there's a whole, we have a bunch of information, not just a list of the repositories, but they're contextualizing repositories and trying to touch on the issues that are important for making a high quality repository. So anyway, starting there for identifying repositories for different disciplines. And again, that level of quality is really important because all repositories are not created equal. And then Jay mentioned this a little bit, but Scopus is a product that we work with at Syracuse University a lot. They have started to index
they're not indexing preprints, but they're pulling them in at the author or profile level. And then you have Dimensions, Engineering Village, and Lens.org. These are all databases that we work with pretty regularly as well. Lens.org is a free-based tool. I highly recommend it if you're not using Lens. It's a great resource to check out. It's also a patent-heavy database, but it is a great, also indexes scholarly literature well. Sometimes picks up things that the other large literature databases don't. But the point of mentioning those is that they're all indexing preprints, but they are indexing them as a separate content type. So you can go into those databases and you can run it by content type, which is nice. Google Scholar, who knows, right? But they're discoverable there. And then I wanted to mention PubMed and PubMed Central. They are doing some really interesting things right now with preprints. They have a preprint pilot going where they're experimenting with how they're starting to incorporate preprints into their databases. And I believe they started with just NIH-funded research at this point, and they're starting to pull it in, and they have, one of the ways they're doing it is they're labeling it with a big green box that says preprint. But, and they're also working on the problem of connecting the preprint to the final published version. So they're doing some work around that as well. I don't know that we mentioned this, but we do have like 3 slides of resources at the end of our presentation, and when that gets distributed, you'll have a whole bunch of things to read if you choose. Okay, so I think that we covered this a little bit already, but talking about the benefits of preprints, you're providing early results, you're encouraging dialogue around the research. So many preprint repositories offer an opportunity to comment on preprints. So it's not review, but there are opportunities to comment and add your questions or maybe concerns about that preprint. There are also, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but there are also efforts to actually incorporate real peer review into the preprint process as well. And so anyway, these are all great ways to look at that, to have open dialogue because it's all transparent, which is really great. It also shows the progression of work or research in terms of like the progression or how has it evolved, essentially. These are questions that I might get about preprints. Should I cite a preprint in my paper? And how do I know if a preprint is high quality if it hasn't been peer reviewed? I'm not going to answer these questions outright. Well, yes, I can. I actually could answer them, I think. But so how would I cite, should I cite a preprint in my paper? There are still some journals that recommend that you don't cite preprints, so it depends on where you're publishing. And I would always tell a student or whoever it is, a researcher, that they should look for that final published version first before citing a preprint. But it's standard practice now. There are, one of the metrics for preprints are that they have citation counts. So they are being cited. They're just treated a little bit differently. They're not the same as a final published article. They may be considered kind of like they could be considered a blog, or a blog is too far in one direction, but they're not, they're a different type of source in terms of thinking about how they're cited in the paper. So sometimes you may be, I'd rather have people cite everything in their paper for the most part. So if, especially students, so if they're citing something like a reference or an encyclopedia article, something like that, that help them get to their final paper or something. It helps to see the progression of where their thinking is coming from. So it doesn't serve as that peer-reviewed final published version, but it does have a place in terms of being cited. You can also, I would answer a lot of, should I cite a preprint and is it high quality, based on helping them think through evaluation of preprints. So it comes down to the similar argument that you'd have about a journal article. So do you know any of the authors? Are you is it a reputable repository that they published in? I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but medRxiv and bioRxiv are starting to do automated screening of preprints. And so they're looking for things like, did this preprint have, did they use IRB? You know, did they use ethical research practices? So there are, again, should I cite this preprint? Where did it come from? Do you know the authors? Can you find the authors in some of their other published works? Things like that. So you're contextualizing it. It's not one straight answer, but you're doing evaluation and looking at the source that it came from. I'm happy to talk more about that after anyone has questions. But again, this is me figuring it out as I go as well. So just trying to, yeah, it's an evaluative decision. Okay. Conversations with authors. Again, it's that this is what a preprint is, this is what a postprint is, you know, in the context. And again, these are disciplines probably that don't use preprints typically that you're having these conversations with. So this is something that I talk with authors a lot about, so changing practices. And so for example, someone in the humanities, they may be publishing in Italian language journal that is a small press publisher. It's not indexed anywhere and there's no DOI. And so in those cases, I may actually talk to them about using a preprint and then submitting it to a preprint repository that would give them a DOI. So even if their final published version isn't discoverable or as discoverable, then maybe the preprint is out there and that's attracting attention. And then maybe in Crossref you can then link those two publications together. But these aren't conversations that you should think about after the fact. Trying to have these conversations with authors before they publish. What are your goals for publishing? Are you trying to reach just the people in this room? Or are you trying to, again, publish for impact or publish to, improve society or climate change, or what are your goals? And then the decisions you make about things like preprints and DOIs and where it's indexed become really important. So anyway, those are the conversations I have with kind of the non-STEM disciplines often. And then I think I covered some of this already, so the selection of a preprint repository. And then sometimes there are also conversations about open peer review. I read an interesting article that I did include in the resources about if we're going to change standards in terms of adoption of preprints, what is the author's responsibility or the researcher's responsibility in contributing to preprints and open peer review, things like that. If you are publishing preprints, is it your responsibility to go on and start commenting and try and improve the dialogue and discourse around open science and transparent science by engaging in this process? So that's another consideration. Okay, preprint metrics. So you did a great job, Shirley did a great job at the beginning of the presentation talking about it is a proven fact, or there are many studies that show that if you have a preprint version of your article, and then also open access, that is a key piece there as well. But those articles are going to get more attention. And I'm sure it's not across the board, but on an average, it has been shown to be true by several studies. So one of the things that I like about preprints are the opportunity to look at not just the actual counts of things, because metrics are counts, right? So you're looking at the attention that something's getting based on the number of times people have interacted with it. So I love the fact that there can be comments and sometimes reviews that are associated with these works that you could actually look at. And then, for example, if I was going up for, working with someone going up for tenure, they could use some of those comments as additional evidence towards, someone thought that had this feedback about my research or things like that. So it's actual information that can give you some context about the research as opposed to just a count. Those preprint metrics could also help you identify if there's a problem with the research. So then there may be a red flag. For example, someone commented and said, whoa, what's going on here? Or is this ethical, So attention isn't always good attention. But if there's transparency here, it helps to identify what that attention or what those counts mean. Different types of, so basically, preprint metrics across different repositories are completely different. Some do no metrics at all. There are some services like SSRO that are using things like PlumX metrics. But typically the metrics are related to alt metrics, which are social media mentions, mentions on things like news articles and blogs, and then downloads and abstract reviews, things like that. So for many of the preprint servers, the metrics that you're getting are those types, those counts, how people have interacted with it. And then this is a question at the end that I don't have an answer for, but it's something that I think I would love to see. At least if you're combining, whether you're combining the final metrics with the published article or not, I would love to see them in tandem and so I could compare them. And so that's something I'd love to see developed in the future.
Oh yeah, so this is just, we sort of said there's a lot of questions to be explored in preprints. There's a lot of things that you're trying to figure out. When I was saying in the beginning, like I like this space because it's an interesting place for experimentation. So as we've alluded, there's a lot of interaction with preprints aren't peer reviewed, but are there ways they might intersect? And so we're seeing people who are reviewing preprints and posting the reviews alongside the preprints. We're seeing people who are doing their reviews of a journal article and then are posting their review as a preprint on a preprint server. There's just, to have more open, transparent reviews. We're seeing review comments where people will post a preprint and there be open review and the author can respond to the review. And then the author can choose to either leave it up as a preprint or, it's almost really like publish it with one of the journals that is associated with review comments. There's just so much creativity that's going on in this space. Where we'll end up, who knows? Are some of the ideas bad? Probably. But, it's just a really interesting place to experiment. We talked about linking the preprints to the version of record. I'm on the advisory council for Crossref, and we're working on ways to make that easier. Right now, it's not consistently done. Some of these are our other ideas. There's some problems we still have to figure out. What do we do with the withdrawals of preprints? Do we treat it like we do versions of records or not? Is the expectation that once it's up, it will stay up always forever? There's different views of opinions on that among preprint servers. And do we want to have different, again, this Crossref advisory group, we're going to be coming out with a white paper in a month or two on like best practices for some of these things. But do we want to have different versions? Like maybe someone submits a paper and they have a version, then they revise it enough to get a new version, a new deal. How do we link those? Maybe then they take the third one and they post it to a different preprint server. How can we have more of a transparency and scholarly record preserved when it's not just the preprint? So we have version of record, we have data sets we want to link, we have codes we want to link. Now we have, how many versions of preprints we want to link. How does that all work together? So those are some of the questions that are still being explored by the community.
Did want to end on one more slide. I know we are over time.
Oh, we are.
But I think these are some of the things that we identified that were really interesting in terms of new initiatives that are happening. So for preprint quality, if I would encourage you to look at eLife and Review Commons. eLife is actually, I believe, requiring preprints now in a new, they're doing a new peer review model where they're connecting, the preprint and then the review is public and then then it's published in the eLife journal. And then Review Commons is a service that can sit in between the publisher and the preprint server, and then those reviews also become public. And it's an initiative called it's TRIP, the abbreviation is TRIP, but it's transparency something. I had it on my notes, but it's something that's interesting to look at though. Automated screening, I mentioned this with medRxiv and bioRxiv, but they are starting to do some really more advanced automated screening of preprints, which could help flag things that are of questionable integrity, I guess. And then we've mentioned ASAP Bio a bunch of times, but one of the reasons people are scared to put their preprints out there is that they're going to get a bad review or someone's going to interact with their material in a negative way. So ASAP Bio has developed a series of guidelines for reviewers in terms of how they interact with preprints. And the abbreviation is FAST. And again, I had it written down, but I can't remember it now. But it's something, I can pull it up in a minute if anyone has questions. I like this. Data Seer and bioRxiv are working together. This is a really neat initiative, and I think of it as a holistic approach. So you've got your preprint, you've got your connection from the preprint server to open reviews, and also to a pipeline to publishing in some cases in specific journals. But as this is happening, there's a layer over the top that they're using Data Seer, and they're actually scanning for relevant data sets, essentially. So I love the idea of being a more holistic process, because for researchers, it's just so much sometimes, to keep track of all the different pieces. So if you could integrate all of it together, I think that's an amazing step forward. And then Shirley mentioned the Crossref Advisory Group. They're doing some great things both with figuring out how to get preprints into Crossref, but also working to look at the metadata to link articles to the final published version. So, and again, we have all of these resources in our, I think we have 3 different slides of resources and good extra reading that you can go into.
Thank you, everyone.